Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television here on Channel 1 Television. Point of View brings you the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. And we have a 2-in-1 show for you tonight. So the former president and flag bearer of the NDC, John Dramani Mahama, met Ghana's media on Sunday night from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Very interesting session. We'll be reviewing that program with his spokesperson, Joyce Ba-Muktari, on what went on there, whether the questions were great, what kind of answers he gave, and where that leaves him and his opponents. Later in the show, the MPP flag bearer has chosen his running mate. He happens to be MP for Menchia South and Minister for Energy, Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh, affectionately called Napo. So in the second part of the show, we'll be speaking to his press secretary for almost 8 years, Rodin Nkrumah Boateng, will be telling us the Napo we do not know and why he believes Napo will be a great running mate for Dr. Bawumia. All this and more when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So it's a big political show. We're in the political season from now to the election. So yesterday, John Dramani Mahama, the NDC flag bearer and former president, met members of the Ghanaian media at an impressive event at Kempinski Hotel. He spoke for 30 minutes exactly and took over 40 questions based on our calculation of about 7 questions per round and answered those questions from 8:30 to 11 p.m. The event was introduced by his spokesperson, Joyce Ba-Muktari, who's joining us tonight to analyze her boss's performance and also, of course, the media's performance and where this type of engagement lies in their campaign strategy. Joyce, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. And of course, thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell from your greeting that you are quite happy with what happened yesterday. How much of a relief was it for you in terms of the organization, and how do you assess the event overall?
Well, thank you, Bernard. I mean, you do know that these things take enormous time to prepare for. A lot of preparation, a lot of anxiety, and all the things that you're not sure what will happen. I observed that for the very first time, even I was actually quite nervous because, we are with the media, the fourth realm of the estate. You don't even know what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And you must be very careful that you don't have any mishaps on the mic. And so I was extremely cautious, but I must be very honest and sincere with all of you that I am deeply humbled, very, very grateful, and the whole office, the flag bearer's office, the National Democratic Congress, and all of us who were present were particularly delighted that all of you, very important members of this media, made time to join us. In terms of your timing, I think that, yes, we could have done better with the time. I was hoping that by 7 p.m. the room would be probably full and all the seats taken. But yes, I know that there were a few challenges with accreditation and who was supposed to come and who wasn't. But yes, it's a work in progress. And as we go along, I'm sure that we'll get it better. And the next one will be probably seamless and run very, very well. In terms of our preparedness, I think we're very well prepared. We're very well organized. We chose a very comfortable venue because we're hoping that it would take us about 3 hours to start and finish. And we wanted everybody to be very comfortable and relaxed in that atmosphere. I think that we started on time at 8 p.m. sharp. John Dramani Mahama and, of course, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, his running mate, entered the room, and the room was packed. And we had all of you top guys and top ladies. I mean, you were in the room. We had Samson, we had Alfred Okansi, we had Kojo Yankson. I mean, all of the notable persons were in the room. We had Shamima Muslim, Noor Falong, Annie Ampofo from Metro TV, and many others from across the country. I think that we're deeply honored and privileged. And I saw a certain sense of obligation, a certain sense of duty, a certain commitment also ensuring our democracy. And I love the questions. Some were not so easy to navigate. In fact, some of the questions, I actually sat very anxiously on my toes, really. I was literally on tenterhooks and asking myself, what is the boss going to say? But, I know one thing for certain about John Mahama. When you meet him prepared, he's very, very well prepared. And I believe that he enjoys media engagements. And of course, he hasn't had one like that in quite some time. We want a fair playing ground. We just want all of you to give us an opportunity to tell our side of the story. I think that is all we asked.
So was this,
and on that occasion, I think
was this open
that
to,
is all that we
was this
got.
open to all media? Everybody invited? Was it an
Well,
open invitation? How did it work?
To be honest, we invited a few of you, but then we also had a portal that was open for persons to make online arrangements. So all you had to do was to register, and then you got an email back. And I think that worked very, very well, so that it would make it easier for us to identify who was in the room and who was not. So yes, we had a very, wide array of individuals from a wide cross-section of the media here in Ghana. I think it was a beautiful arrangement. And it worked well. Look, let's move to these paperless things where we can do things online and expect that people would actually follow the instructions and appear there on time. And of course, register as we all did. I think that it went very, very well. And everybody who was there must have left there feeling that the NDC had actually done something right, that we had gotten it correct, and that everybody who was in the room was someone who had actually been happy to be there and, of course, willingly registered to join us. And I think that was beautiful.
So we've noticed that after his rounds he did visiting the regions, he's been meeting specific groups, so worker groups, private sector, and that kind of thing. Is this media meeting one of those, or is this more of a bespoke thing? Because I know he's met like different constituencies or identifiable groups. So is the media one of those groups, or is this more like an attempt to get him to answer the questions of Ghanaians through the media, and therefore there will be more of this particular kind? Just give us a sense into where this fits into your strategy.
Well, that for the whole of this year, actually, he's been on this campaign dubbed the Let's Build the Ghana We Want Together tour. Indeed, he's been to the length and breadth of the country, all 16 regions, taking this message. He's been meeting a cross-section of various associations, professional associations, various institutions. We had actually planned a press soiree, really, at some point. But then we also asked ourselves, why would you want to have a soiree just to sit and make merry when you can also have a more formal sitting, where you can have persons within the media ask you all the questions that they want to ask you? Remember that he went on the flag bearer contest tour, finished that one. And then, of course, he's also embarked on this Let's Build Ghana Together tour. So it was just about time for us to have this elevated conversation with the media. But why not also ask them to attend even in the form of a press conference? Look, I think that transparency and accountability is actually at the basic level of our democracy. It is a conversation that all of us need to attach enormous importance to, where we put our leaders to strict proof, where we scrutinize what they tell us, where we actually question their policies, where we ask for contextualizing some of the things that they put out there. I think that is really what communication is all about. And so I think that yesterday was John Mahama meeting the media, partly as an engagement, and of course also as an opportunity for you to actually help him propagate, disseminate, and highlight his message. And I think that all in all, each one of us came out of the room knowing that whatever it is that we went there for, we had actually fully achieved that, and hope that he will do more of these ones as we go into the campaign and, of course, leading up to the election in December.
The vice president, who is his main opponent, seems to have gained in the polls, I think, in the last month. Some attribute that to his campaign tour that he did, which ended in the Ashanti region. So it seems like this one has sort of given the initiative back to candidate Mahama. How do you track the effect of these things, and how do you compare their effectiveness to what your main opponents are doing? Is there some rubric you're using? Is it media recall? Is it social media impressions? Is it positive news items? How do you know whether people are receiving your message in comparison to your main opponent?
Bernard, for the very first time in a very long time, everything that we're doing is actually data-driven. I'm sure you heard Mr. Mahama answer that beautifully yesterday. We have a team of sharp-shooting researchers who literally give us almost daily or weekly insights, depending on what you want. So each time we have a major engagement, we have a major conversation, we have a major outing, there is a certain guidance. It's all part of a certain strategy, more or less. Indeed, what you also know is that each time within these campaigns, when we are out on the road, certainly people are very interested in what is happening. Our numbers will go up, there'll be more eyeballs for us, etc. And then when they set off, naturally the same will happen. So I think that it will be like a pendulum every now and then, but you can tell that all in all, research actually posits that the National Democratic Congress is doing a fantastic job, that in terms of recognition, in terms of message dissemination, in terms of our campaign strategy, we have come a very, very long way. Indeed, for the very first time, you can tell our major opponents are actually literally on the defensive every day. Yesterday, I picked up a rumor, some intel that they had actually deployed, I don't know what number of persons on social media to try and, literally, fact check us and all of that. I'm still waiting to see just how impactful that has been. But look, what I know for a fact is that we are partners with the media, that no matter how much you campaign and what messages you put out there, if the media doesn't buy into it, then it's very difficult for them to actually communicate your message to the wider public. So we do need to have media engagement from time to time. We need to bring our, policies to the doorstep of the media. And of course, with the NDC, it's always been this very interesting relationship. And so at some point, even I believe that our opponents had actually taken it for granted that the whole media landscape will always be theirs and that, nobody would possibly want to scrutinize anything that they do or how they did things. But I've observed that as things have gotten even worse, there's been enormous interest, enormous scrutiny that they've been put to strict proof. And there's various tests. Let me look at one of the questions yesterday about what we intended to do with the Special Prosecutor's Office. This was actually one of the tools that was raised by our opponents, largely to use it to beat us and to use it to literally convict all of our former appointees, etc. Now there's so many allegations of corruption on their doorstep. And what happens? As soon as the special prosecutors start to try to investigate them, they start to fight back. And of course, you heard all the rumors about even wanting to remove him from office. And we heard about the spat with the former special prosecutor, the Honorable Martin Amidu. I mean, look, if you have very, very good intentions for introducing any policy, for example, I believe that if you execute it accordingly, people will realize it. And don't forget also that, look, I believe strongly, Bernard, and maybe because I'm very close to the campaign, that in 2016, one of our biggest misfortunes was the fact that we had this crippling power outages. I mean, look, the whole of Ghana suffered enormously from those outages, and people were up in arms. Yes, maybe we could even have a solution in much, in quicker time, but it wasn't that easy to do. Look, this was a country that was largely over the years depended largely on Akosombo Dam. We used to have crawlers telling us about the water levels, and then the rain patterns changed, and then climate issues happened, and somehow it threw us completely overboard. Look, it was not in Mr. Mahama's interest for that whole protracted power outage to have actually occurred, but it happened. And it wasn't his fault either, you know what I mean? But of course, maybe because of our very partisan environment, we didn't get the level of sympathy that was required at the time to help us even find a quicker solution. But be that as it may, what happened, happened. But let me tell you one thing. That in 2020, something magical happened that we probably don't harp on enough. That for a political party that had lost with such a large margin, to come back in the way that the NDC did in 2020 spoke to two things. That most of the goodwill that President Akufo-Addo, and of course his vice president actually had come into office with, that by 2020, they were actually on shaky grounds. That people had begun to see that in terms of corruption, what was said didn't measure up to what they were actually doing. And that even in terms of managing the economy, what was said was not as good as what was actually happening. The worst part was that this was a government that was refusing to listen to any criticism. And woe betide you if the criticism came from the NDC or anybody from the other side of the aisle. You will immediately be attacked and condemned. I think that we have all come full cycle.
Okay.
That no man is perfect. That both political parties are not perfect in any way. But let me say one thing about Mahama and the NDC. That this is a political party that cares about Ghana. A political party that thinks through very carefully all of its interventions. A political party that 4 years after a very, very large and disappointing performance at the election, came back to give Ghana its very first hung parliament. I think that we must be told and tell everybody our story and say it in a way that people will learn to appreciate that. Look, the NDC stands very, very tall in terms of success as a party. It has given us the longest, actually, republic where we've had no interruptions per se. And when you talk about democracy, I think that more than any other political party, the National Democratic Congress appreciates just what our democracy ought to sound like and ought to look like. You know, when I navigate the terrain, both as a lawyer and as a politician, Bernard, I have come to one realization that we need to interrogate more the character of our leaders.
Fair enough. Let me jump on that. Let me jump on that and ask you a question. So one of the things I noticed was that he didn't refer to his main opponent much in terms of mentioning his name. He's mostly talking about the Akufo-Addo government, right? So we didn't see him necessarily refer to the name Dr. Bawumia. I don't know whether that was deliberate. Now I ask this because, as you rightly pointed out, in 2020, NDC gained over 30 seats in parliament, but only managed to halve the presidential number. Now that Dr. Bawumia is on the ticket, is it part of a strategy to keep referring to Akufo-Addo instead of Bawumia because you want to make this a referendum on the Akufo-Addo government? Because I don't remember how many times you used the name Bawumia at all, but he's the guy he's going to face now. Was it just inadvertent? Was it part of a strategy? Is it that you're focusing on the Akufo-Addo 8 years? Or you don't want to make it a Mahama Bawumia contest of ideas kind of thing? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, I mean, Bernard, we want to focus on our message. We want to focus on our campaign. We want to actually prosecute largely an issues-based campaign. And of course, we've all watched the trajectory of our opponents that have spent all the time on any platform they get, literally 7 years and 7 months later. Each time you hear Dr. Bawumia, the next thing you hear is Mahama. Each time you hear Akufo-Addo, the next thing you hear is Mahama. So you ask yourselves, you know, really, I mean, in 7 years, do they not have anything more to say? Do they not have any other story to tell? Do they not have anything to say about fixing the economy? Indeed, today, exchange rate is actually out of the roof at 16 cedis to $1 and higher for the pound sterling. What exactly are the managers of our economy doing? And why is Dr. Bawumia not telling us exactly what he is doing to fix this totally bankrupt economy? So yes, we want to focus on ideas. Look, I will tell you one thing, and this is from a very personal perspective, Bernard, that with the scrutiny that John Mahama and the Mills administration received in their time in office, if the same scrutiny were to be applied to Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, I can bet you that this government would have collapsed. Look at the issues in Kenya, for example, and compare to what we have here. But you see, the worst thing about our part of the world is that our leaders are simply not listening. Try to criticize them and you will see. You know, look, I can tell that they themselves are in a complete quagmire. They are in a conundrum because I'm sure they thought they had totally destroyed the image of the NDC, the image of its leadership, and that they had dragged their faces in the mud so much that they never expected that there will be any room for recovery. Indeed, you can hear Mr. Akufo-Addo still trying to refer to all those very low things he used to say about John Mahama, forgetting that there's an even wider log in his eye. We are now saddled with a vice president whose wife even stood on platforms to take on Mr. Mahama in very disrespectful ways. It is one of the things that I'll never forget about that campaign. When have you heard Mrs. Mahama speak about any other spouse in the politics of our country? It has never happened before, but it happened in 2016. And today, that so-called kid they gave us has literally failed on every lecture that he gave us. You know, look, people talk about all sorts of things. I just look at two things, for example. I look at the story about corruption. I look at the cathedral, the National Cathedral, 339 million Ghana cedis, and not one pool, not one poll to show for the money that has been expended. That, for me, sums up the failure of this administration. So Mr. Mahama really does not have to speak to it. I mean, I talk about all the things that we talked about in our day in office regarding corruption and acts of graft, for example. Look at the matter to do with the Ford Navigator story in particular. I mean, seriously, let's be honest, the source of gifts that presidents receive or vice presidents receive in the annals of world history or even in our history in Ghana, tell me, how will that Ford navigator even fare in that whole debate or conversation, situating it even within the levels of corruption that we have seen? Look at the matter to do with the Kwalugu Dam, that we have our sitting vice president telling us about the completely non-existent project, and yet $11.9 million was paid as advance mobilization. We have the matter of PDS, where John Mahama and Professor Mills negotiated for a compact, and the minute they left office, familial fights and conflict of interest issues led to the issues to do with PDS. We lost $12 million in the process. But no, the list is endless. And so I think that on the matter of corruption alone, President Akufo-Addo and Vice President Bawumia literally must actually eat humble pie. And
so Joyce, before we go, some are asking for a debate between President Mahama and Dr. Bawumia. Is this something your camp is willing to engage in?
You know, I personally have no appetite for a debate. I think that we debate when we literally know that our issues are probably parallel, or that our issues are actually, we can juxtapose the two one way or the other. When I look at what we have, when I look at the current trajectory, when I look at the failings of this particular administration, I ask myself, why do we need to put up with a debate?
Okay.
But of course, this is a decision that the upper people usually would make. It's not my decision to make. And as the conversations and debates, go along, maybe eventually some conversations around that will happen. And who knows? But of course, we do know about all the debates between John Mahama and then candidate Akufo-Addo, and we know who won all those debates. So I believe that the fact that Mr. Mahama is a man whose energy and knowledge is unparalleled, is not in doubt. And I'm sure that on any day, with whomever, I know who's going to win the debate. But I don't think that immediately I would want to see you put them to strict proof first. I'm not sure that there's even any extreme appetite for
thank you, Jezba Mukhtari. And as we say, great event. We were happy to be there. Thank you for indulging us this interview. Jezba Mukhtari is the spokesperson for former President John Dramani Mahama, who's the flag bearer for the NDC. Maybe we'll show you some. I'm sure we're showing you some of the clips from that event yesterday. Umaru Sanda asked a question, two questions actually. He asked a question about the National Cathedral, which was he referring to, and also the OSP. And I asked a question also. It's also a 3-in-1 question, all right? A question around the a lean government, 60 ministers, reducing ministers, but basically both governments have been increasing the number of MMDCs we've had from 110 in the late 80s to 261, and then the EC also increasing our parliamentary numbers, and also the issue of Accra, he sort of dealt with those. So we'll leave it here. When we come back, I'm going to turn my attention to something else, but we want the viewers to tell us what you make of yesterday's program. Send us a WhatsApp message on the number of the screen. Did you like it? Were you impressed? Would you vote for John Mahama because of what you saw? We'll come back with more when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back. The point of view tonight is quite an interesting thing. So we are reviewing the John Mahama Meets the Press event, and then we are previewing or even profiling Dr. Matthew Puku Prempeh. So on Tuesday, there's going to be a big event in Kumasi, and he will be outdoored. Rodney Nkrumah Boateng is his, I want to call him publicist, press secretary, I'm not sure which is which. He's been doing this job since 2017, from Education Ministry to Ministry of Energy. And he's in the studio to talk to us. Rodney, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Nice to see you once again.
So you are the man's press secretary, not necessarily the ministry he works for. How does this work? Because I know you are with him in education.
That's correct.
And you followed him to energy. So you're working for him.
Yes, but that was in education. I was a press secretary, so my profile was quite
He
narrow.
drew into the ministry.
Yes. Now, in energy, my remit goes beyond the press secretary, which is basically in charge of his speeches.
Yeah.
I also head the communications unit.
Wonderful.
So in the ministry's management structure, as a unit head, you will see me there.
So he brought you and he's carried you along. Is he carrying you into the campaign?
That is the matter for the goats.
Because
the campaign, yes.
Yeah, because I do know that when people are announced, sometimes parties bring other people. So for example, if you look at Dr. Bawumia himself, there were people who were interviewing as his people, but immediately he became flag bearer and the campaign started, other people were brought in.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So is that the same thing that's going to happen with this?
Yes, already, I'm sure you're aware of this. Fifi
Yeah.
Boafo
Okay.
has been brought in as his spokesperson. So
Okay.
I expect to see that. Obviously, the team will have to widen the communications team of the ministry,
Yeah.
because there's also ministry work to be done. So the communications team would have to be widened to bring in
Other people.
from the party perspective.
So basically, there are people who will be added beyond his people, and I'm using his people in a sense that, again, using the Baumia example,
Yeah.
there are Baumia's people he was working with,
I get the point.
and
Yes,
then there are other people who were brought in to support.
That's correct.
So there are new people who will come in.
That's correct. Yes.
So just looking for positions.
I'm not quite sure. It's a question of teamwork and just everybody working towards a common goal, which is to ensure victory of the ticket. So the work is more.
Yeah.
The scope is widened. So
Yeah.
obviously more hands are needed. It cannot be the small team that works around him any longer as minister.
Something curious I noticed. You write in the graphic regularly, and I read
That's correct.
almost everything you write.
Thank you.
You've never written about you hardly write about Napo, and particularly in the lead up to the naming, when I'm scavenging for news, some of the newspapers write about him regularly, awards and things. I didn't really see you talk about him. I didn't see any article promoting him. Was that deliberate?
It was deliberate. But just a point, on his birthday, I did profile him
on his birthday?
23rd May.
Yes, which is 3 days after my birthday, so I probably missed the course of
probably you were in
celebrating.
the heights of our
Yes.
celebration. It is deliberate because when you do what I do, being in his circle, you have to be careful about your public pronouncements. This was at a time when, of course, it's the running mate is not something that you compete for or go out there to lobby for, and so to be seen as doing that might create the wrong impression, because we've never had this discussion, that I am probably fronting for him and trying to win him a certain favor in terms of the flag bearers. So I had to impose sort of, I don't want to use the word omerta because it has
It's like discipline on yourself.
I have to impose a set of silence on myself to say, I am not going to talk about this because it's not something that he talks about. And whenever the question has come up back in the party, he said, look, my job is to focus on what my mandate is and deliver as energy minister, and that's what I'm focused on.
So while other people were freely speaking about him, because you were his official spokesperson,
Yes,
anything you say will be construed
it
to
will
mean...
be construed to mean that he was speaking through me.
But that, I mean, fine. But I would say covertly or even overtly, he seemed to be gunning for this for a long time because, for example, there are some newspapers that always profile Napo. I don't want to mention names, but there's always a story on Napo on one or two papers, positive stories for him. He's won so many awards. And if you look at the way, there's a way we can tell that somebody's gunning for something. So even though he didn't come out to say he was gunning for it, you could tell in the last hours.
I'll put it as conjecture.
No, I mean, look.
Listen.
It can't be. He was obviously gunning for it.
Probably, and I know you're going to say this is probably an African thing, but there probably was a groundswell of opinion saying that, and I got those calls a lot. Said, look, won't your boss throwing in that? Even when it came to the presidential primaries, people were calling me and say, but won't your boss run? And I'm like, no, he's not running. And but at least he's going to be running mate. And I said, well, I don't know. I have never had a conversation with him where he had said to me, Rodney, I'm going for running mate. I am not privy to it.
You mean officially?
Officially or otherwise?
No. I mean, come on, Rodney. Come on, look, Prempeh College has built a house and named it after him, right? There's, I think I've counted over 20 awards.
The award, look,
These
these awards have been coming.
Profiling.
No, Bernard, come on. These awards have been coming at him since our time in education.
Okay.
I mean, are we saying that back then he was gunning for a running mate?
We don't
in
know.
education, we get all these awards.
We understand from them.
I can fill this room with citations. I can fill this place with awards. All over the place.
Okay, based on when did he begin to get interested? Because some have known that he's been gunning for this even from education, that he's been positioning.
That is news to me.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So when did he get interested?
I'm not sure you can say he. How do I put this without? You're trying to put me on the spot. But that discussion has never, and I sit in his meetings, I sit in a lot of discussions around him, and I've never heard him ever say that he was interested.
Seriously?
Yeah. Maybe he had other conversations elsewhere, I don't know. But I have never heard him say that he was. It has never been on the table in any meetings, in any discussions.
So
Yeah,
how
of
come
course.
everybody...
Look, there have been times when he'll be stepping out of the office, and then maybe you'd have a party worker. You have them coming around every now and then. And then people will shout, "Oh, Dachi Hine," and all of that stuff.
And when they say Dachi, what does he do?
Well, Dachi Hine, he would just, I mean, if someone is saying hello to you, however they're saying, you would at least acknowledge them. You don't want to be rude.
Yeah.
So he would acknowledge people. People would say all sorts of things.
I'm surprised.
Since his nomination, confirmation, people have said all sorts of things to me about me.
Yeah.
And I just smile about it, and I just.
So of course you're a disciplined publicist stroke comic. So, but I would say to you that even from my secondary school days, my mates from Kumasi would mention Napo.
Yeah.
And because I think it was Local Nooks president.
That's great.
And they would say that if there was somebody who would one day gun for president, even from those days, they used to say he would be the person. Because he had become Local Nooks and then he sort of went out and came back. Yeah. So the name is very common. And there are very few politicians who are known by their house name or nickname. Yeah. Do you understand? It's called Matthew Poku Prembe. But if you did a Napo on social media, in fact, Napo is more popular than Matthew Poku Prembe.
I first thought, before I came to work for him, I first thought that Napo was just a short form of Napoleon.
So I thought too.
Yeah, I thought
I
it
didn't
was.
know.
And he actually laughed when I first said that to him. Oh, I thought you were. I said, no, it's Nanapoku.
It's Nanapoku.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
So what I'm saying is that even with conversations around people from Kumasi that I know, they've always known that he was gunning for something. So maybe it was discipline not to overtly say it, but to every observer, he was actively gunning for
I'm
it,
not sure about
working towards
I'm not sure about the active.
building a team. Because the other thing I'll say to you is that there are politicians I know, and I want to use local parlance, who swear by Napo. Do you understand? So like there are even MPs who love him and talk about him, and that's not very common for a politician who's not ambitious for something.
No, but hold on. I mean, every politician is ambitious. Of course, every politician is ambitious. But are we saying that from Nooks, he had always wanted to be vice president or president? Look, he does what comes to him naturally.
All right.
He does what comes to him naturally in terms of building people, in terms of supporting people to achieve whatever ambitions they may have. I think it's a bit unfair to box it all in and say, oh, all this must have been because he wants to become president one day. I mean, and if you speak to people, whether from KNUST, everywhere else, before he, even as an MP in his constituency, long before he even became an MP, before he became a minister, the very traits that you're mentioning, that people would swear by him, that he has people around him, cannot be put down to wanting to become president. It must be something that just comes to him naturally, that there are certain traits that just come to him naturally. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis
fair enough. Let me not overput. But you were not surprised when he was named?
No, I was not surprised.
You were not?
I mean, because, look, his name has been splashed across to get alongside with other names. So, yes, of course, it would be naive for me to say that I was surprised. I was not surprised.
Was he interviewed for the job by the vice president?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of. But when he went for the NEC meeting, they did talk to him, as in when he was finally presented to the NEC. We don't know what happened in that room, but did they
I didn't get into
You didn't get in the room?
So no.
Yeah.
There was a huge...
But we understand it was unanimous.
Yes.
It was unanimous.
The General Secretary announced.
So it was, there was no, in that room there was no opposition?
No. Not from what the General Secretary says.
We also told it was always going to be Ashanti. Is that correct? It was always going to be Ashanti. That's what we've been told. Even Nanabi said that
I wish
to us.
I were a fly on the wall in all of these matters. Okay. I do not know. It would make sense electorally to have someone from the party's base to help galvanize the base, to help energize the base. But I do not think that it was the only factor that saw him, because he's not the only Ashanti politician. So there must have been something that the flag bearer saw in him that made him want to choose. And I wouldn't put it down to ethnicity, and leave it just there. There has to be far more than that.
But did did we know what Dr. Mahama was looking for? I remember if you read the Africa Watch interview where I think gave 5 characteristics, including compatibility, hard work, and that type of thing. Now let's just do an analysis. What do you think he was looking for in choosing, for which Napo edged the others?
I think for every politician, grassroots appeal, and in this campaign, grassroots appeal is going to be very important.
Yeah.
And I think that is one strength that he brings across. I mean, you just mentioned that there are people who swear by him. A lot of people see a certain charisma in him, that he's able to get things done. And he's also, from my interaction with him over the past 7 years, he is an achiever and a doer and an achiever. I mean, he sets his eyes on something, and it's laser focused. This is where we want to get to. We are getting there. And I saw that, whether it was free SHS, whether it was licensure, some of the, whether it's national service for teachers, some of the difficult areas, double track, the computer meltdown, some of the issues that sort of stuck out during his tenure as education minister. And you saw in there a certain unflappable character who did not easily get carried away. When we had to reopen the schools, the COVID, that's Mary's Accra Girls incident where a student died, and you saw him a certain determination that this is my mandate, this is my vision, and I want to get there because that is what I have been asked to do by the president. So I think those are the qualities that...
So grassroots support...
Grassroots appeal is very
And then sort of the drive.
The drive, the ambition and the sort of determination.
But not necessarily similarity in personality to the candidate. Again, this is the analysis we've had is the vice president seems more affable and a bit more I want a word now, words feel so a bit
they are looking for good cop, bad cop thing.
No,
is that what you are trying to say?
No, you see, the vice president is a very easygoing, more malleable in terms of relationally. The Napo we see from outside is a bit more straight shooter. So he's basically either you hate him or you love him kind of guy. And I think Robert Hinson said it nicely when he said, strong brands repel and attract us equally. But in that sense, he was giving an Obama example. But I sort of get the same feeling.
Margaret Thatcher too.
Yeah, so you either love him or you hate him. There's no, although you can say with people like Mahama into, and even Bawumia, they are a bit less like that. I don't know if it's a fair analysis.
I get the point they're making. I think part of good chemistry between two people tend to be when they're coming from, I wouldn't say opposite ends, but where they do not necessarily tick all the boxes together in the same fashion. And I think that, again, as I said, maybe good cop, bad cop probably is the closest example that I can give without any particular suggestion. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes in partnering up with someone, you see in each other things that complement each other.
Okay.
And so, as you're saying, Dr. Bawumia has a certain personality that is unique to him. Dr. Prempeh also has a certain personality, but they have a good chemistry, and I'm sure that they'll make a wonderful team.
How up for it is he? He issued a statement that we read, which I'm sure you were part of. We saw a lot of, I don't know if they have the statement to show, a lot of God in the statement, a lot of I'm humbled, a lot of, I mean, we don't want to analyze the statement, but the statement was very well crafted to present a certain view. So he started by thanking God and how this is destiny, then thanking the president, and of course thanking Bawumia as well. And then what's going on there?
No, I mean, Ghanaians are a very God-centered people. You know, everything we do. I'm surprised we didn't even have a prayer before we started listening to we start our official meetings with prayer. I mean, it's quite central to us. And if you go down his Facebook page all along, you know, he talks about God in his Facebook posts. He's doing so for several years, whether in church, whether you know, it's standard to him. It's when you say crafted, it probably gives the impression that something is being projected that is not. And I would say that is not the case.
It's
what you see is what you're getting.
But you've heard, I mean, you know that he's considered to be arrogant.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, and
I've been hearing since 2017.
He's I'm sure it's subjective, but it's a difficult job to be is publicist, isn't it?
Not really, no.
Because you just admitted that the base is where we are looking at, and the base like you irrespective of how you come across. I mean, in the last April, when the light was going off Doomsaw and the journalist met him, I mean, people were very upset because we are having lights out. A journalist meets him and asks him what's going on with Doomsaw, and he basically says, "These are your words." And the journalist says, "Well, won't you give us a timetable? The light keeps going off. We can't plan." He says, "Well, you go prepare the timetable." Now, that's in your face. That's almost insulting, disrespectful to Ghanaians, right? And
okay.
yeah, I mean, you know that to say that to Ghanaians who are having lights out, to say it's not Doomsaw, it's the journalist's own words, prepare your own timetable. I mean, you don't talk to people like that.
The issue about Doomsaw, whether or not it is Doomsaw, that it's been back and forth. I mean, I personally don't get bogged down by whether it's Doomsaw or not, because clearly what pertained recently cannot by any stretch of the imagination be compared to what happened in 2014 or 2015, thereabouts. But again, I personally do not find it necessary. I don't know if you've had this discussion before. I think it was with Evans. I don't find it necessary to get bogged down in that debate. The important thing is it is what it is and what is being done about it and what the timelines are and how to ensure that power is brought back, and then nobody enjoys power cuts. What happened. I mean, that discussion has been had. But even before that discussion, you know, the people have said whatever they have to say, they've had to say, and, you know, it's...
But to say to Ghanaians that, tell a journalist that they should prepare their own timetable, that's... I mean, for you as look, it's a nightmare because you don't say that. You can't tell people.
Why are you suggesting that I'm living a nightmare simply because I speak for him?
Well, because the next day there was a press statement from his team, which I'm sure it has something to do with, trying to say that he had been misconstrued or somebody had sort of twisted what he said. There was some statement to that effect to try and damage control. Because, I mean, that's not appropriate. To tell people who are saying our lights are going to give us a timetable, whether Mahama had light off or not is not the point. Even if we have just 2 weeks of unplanned lights out, if you listen to what Gridco said, that ECG was refusing to give us a timetable, this is Gridco, so it's not serial callers, right? In fact, Gridco wrote to him to chastise ECG for refusing to give us a timetable. So for him to tell the journalist to basically prepare his own timetable, that's not just rude, it's also oblivious to a very clear fact that Gridco had complained about the Doomsaw timetable.
But if I believe in that same interview, again, I don't want us to get all bogged down by a single interview in an attempt to define him, because you cannot define him by just one single interview and one sentence that he said. I think that's patently unfair. But whichever way you look at it, the bottom line, Bernard, is that he had referred earlier in that same interview, I believe, it's been a bit hazy right now, but he had referred to timetabling issues as to ECG having already made a statement about it. And then the journalist pressed on, and I think he ended up saying what he said.
Yeah.
But Bernard, the important thing is that, well, fortunately now we are way past all that, and we are looking forward to what lies ahead, and then we take it from there. I mean, you may put whatever spin you have to put on it, or interpret my job. Look, however you want to do.
Like, we'll take a break. My guest is Rodney Nkrumah Boateng. He is the press secretary to Matthew Puku. Interestingly, they went to rival secondary schools. But they are mates. I find that quite interesting, that Rodney is an Opoku person who happens to live in Napo's constituency, but they didn't know each other, although they are supposed to be mates until the appointment was made. It's quite an interesting conversation. And of course, there's a big outdooring on Tuesday. We'll talk about that as well. This is the point of view. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight is a 2-in-1. We started off with Joyce Bawa Mukhtari, President Mahama's press secretary, if you want, spokesperson, and she was working us through the thinking behind the program last night, and of course the performance of the candidate and her views around the campaign. In studio is the press secretary of the running mate to the new Patriotic Party. Dr. Bawumia has named Matthew Opoku Prempeh as his running mate. So the vice president's running mate. And Rodney Nkrumah Boateng is in the studio. So a couple of interesting things. You hadn't met him until 2017, personally.
Correct. Yes.
That's quite strange because you went to the two biggest schools in Ashanti
Yes, we
region,
did.
and you were supposed to be mates.
And we entered the same year, yes.
But you didn't go to Tech,
No, I went to Legon.
which is probably why.
It's probably
you didn't.
why, yes.
So did you apply to be his press secretary, or he called you to work for him?
A friend of mine that I had engaged, I had known on Facebook for some time, because back then I was quite noisy on social media. Now, pressures of work and all that.
Yeah.
So he called me up after the election and said, and he's a Prempeh guy. I think he's Dr. Prempeh's mate. And he said, I think you make a fantastic press secretary to Dr. Prempeh when he serves as education minister. I said, okay. And he said, I don't want to hear a yes or no, and I've spoken to him about you, so I'm going to put you in touch. So he put us in touch just after the New Year, and I think Napo had come to Kumasi, so he sent me a text.
Okay.
We couldn't meet, and then I was coming to Accra in February. I remember that because it was Kwabena Boadu's funeral at the time at the State House. So I said, okay, fine. So I went to see him, and then we had a chat for about 30 minutes, discussed a few things, and then basically we were on. But I had never, I think, I had listened to him in the aftermath of President Mills's death when he spoke on health care needs for the
it was one of the interviews that
president.
a lot of, in fact, journalists were seeking to get doctors to talk on the matter.
That's correct, yes. So, and because he was in politics and also a medical doctor,
he
seemed the perfect fit.
Yeah.
So that was and then I asked him why he wasn't going to the health sector, because I thought he would be in health. So we had a conversation around all that. And then I think it was the 2nd of March, thereabouts, I started. So I had never known him, and I think he preferred someone he didn't know, so that it would be a completely professional relationship from the get-go, and that is what it has been.
Was he concerned you went to Opoku High School?
We've had a few fights about it, yes. So if I slip up or something, and then he said, Opoku High Niane, and all that stuff. And then
explain that rivalry to me, because I've not seen, Accra, we don't have schools which are direct competitors like that. Achimota is a mixed school, Presec is a boys' school. Accra is more business focused, Presec is more science focused. So we don't really have, but it seems as if the Opoku High Prempeh thing is very...
It is serious. But do you know why? What makes it interesting? When Prempeh was 1949, Opoku High is 52.
Okay.
When the new headmaster for Opoku High was interviewing for students, the interviews took place on Prempeh College campus.
Okay.
And when Opoku High started, Opoku High is a Catholic school and Prempeh is a
Methodist Presbyterian.
So Catholic students at Prempeh who wanted to move to Opoku High were allowed to do so.
Is it?
And Protestant students in Opoku High who wanted to go to Prempeh, who wanted a Methodist institution, were also allowed to do so. So even though...
So it's a shared history?
It's a shared history, but history also steeped in fights.
I remember when Presec beat Opoku High in the last NSMQ, Prempeh says, only Opoku High people will allow such. They're like, they knew that there was no way these guys were.
But I'll tell you something that has been coming at me from a Prempeh friend, and called me and said, you expect Dr. Prempeh to be vice president? I was, of course, he's going to be the vice president. He said, okay. Do you realize that if he becomes vice president, Prempeh would have produced a president and a vice president?
And Opoku High has produced.
And Opoku High has. I'm like, shut up.
I said,
so are you still going to vote for him? Of course I'm going to vote for him. Because at this point, of course, loyalty to...
But two things in terms of where to go. So there are two views that have been expressed.
Yeah.
Let me start with the more difficult one. We interviewed a professor that immediately he was chosen. I think it was in the big issue the day before, and he says, Napo should not be allowed to speak extempore on the campaign trail because his communication has to be properly curated, because it's a minefield. This professor, I think it's at Legon, I'm not sure, Tech. Okay. I don't know if I'm tempting you by asking you as press secretary what you think about that, because that's quite serious advice to make on a national platform, that he needs to be managed in communication, because being education minister or health minister is not the same as being a running mate. It's like a completely new, different ballpark. What's your?
I think every politician at that level needs to be managed, and that's the whole point of having a team of whether it's brands, people who specialize in brands, communications, public relations, all that. They come together as a team, assess the brand, in this case, Dr. Prempeh, or whoever, whether it's a presidential candidate, and then guide accordingly in terms of communication. I don't want to sit here and pretend to have a blueprint for Dr. Prempeh. That's a decision that would have to be made by a team. You know, the team around him, together with communications persons at the highest levels of the party. That's an important strategy decision that needs to be made, and I don't think I'm qualified to make those.
Second one was written by, incidentally, he went to Prempeh as well, Tando. He wrote an article and he made a statement that I thought was a bit, what's the adjective? It's a bit serious, and I don't have all the facts, but I thought it's very serious to make the claim that he says Napo is the most consequential education minister in the Fourth Republic, or something to that. I thought that was quite serious. I haven't done the analysis, but he was basically talking about free SHS.
Yeah, I think I read that, and incidentally, I'm as you mentioned, I write for the Graphic, and tomorrow my article in the Graphic is around Dr. Prempeh's nomination as vice president, and I quote him.
So you believe that?
Of course. Why would I not believe?
What's the most? What's the most consequential education minister?
He makes particular reference to free SHS and what it has done.
Okay.
But by the time Dr. Prempeh was leaving office, free SHS, whatever its ills, whatever its shortcomings, whatever its challenges, the senior high school population of this country had jumped from 800,000 in 2016 to 1.2 million in 2021. Come on, that is something. When we came into office in 2017, between 2013 and 2016, on average, about 100,000 children who passed the BECE and were placed in senior high schools could not take up their places. That came up to between 28 and 30%. In the north, it is between 8 and 11%. It was between 8 and 11%. I don't have the data now, but for the south, the drop-through rate has come down quite significantly. And so, to the extent that it has widened access to senior, because that was the biggest transition drop. From primary to JHS, almost everybody was migrating. From JHS to SHS was where the biggest drop was, which also coincides with the teenage years, where if you lose a child through the cracks, if it's a girl, you're probably going to have teenage pregnancy.
But I'm not downplaying that. But let me give you two counter views. So the transition from A-level to SSS.
Sorry, A-level to...
So A-level to JSS, SSS, O-level, A-level. So that transition...
I'm lost.
So I'm giving you two things that have happened in the past in education.
You mean before?
Yes, which you could also say have been consequential.
Okay.
So Jobo Commission recommends that we move from the old system to the new system. And there were educational ministers who managed that transition. So incidentally, BEC as an example, which is starting today, is how many years old? 34 years old.
Yeah, about, yeah.
So it's been 34 years of SSS. Somebody managed that transition, right? Now that person hasn't said he's the most consequential education minister.
Nothing stops them from saying.
Then there's also Kufuor's time when he introduced school feeding. Access jumped quite significantly from the late 70s, almost over 90-something% in basic education as well. Again, the Minister of Education at the time has not said. So I'm just wondering, is that
Dr. Prempeh himself has not said anything, mind you.
Oh, okay, so it's
a quotation.
Okay, I'm just saying
that
there have been some very serious things
Prempeh
that have happened in our education system. So free SHS is great, but transitioning from O-level, A-level, widened access, because A-level was a very exclusive system. If you look at the number of people who were able to go to secondary school because of JSS, and then you look at the
No, but I'm a bit lost about the GSS O-level.
My point is that
help me
access to education under the old system for A-level was very limited. SSS, JSS opened it up.
But at the same time, O-level equipped you with the tools to be able to gain employment in so many public spaces. The minimum requirement back then was O-level. So, and that was at the age of 16, where you were legally able to work, 16, 17, thereabouts. So even if a person could not progress to A-level, they at least had the basic skills if they wanted to enter the civil service.
But SS was more inclusive. So my point is that JSS, SS was more inclusive than O-level, A-level, generally. Oh, because A-level, because there were even schools without A-level.
Yeah, it's true.
But every school has SS3.
That's correct.
So generally the transition, and I'm not even necessarily saying fear SS, but I'm just trying to say that there are big things have happened.
No, nobody is saying that it is the only consequential thing that has happened.
All right.
So it's a question of relativity.
All right, cool.
You know, I mean, I wouldn't downplay President Kufuor's initiative at opening up,
Yeah.
through school feeding. I wouldn't downplay the point that you made.
Yeah.
But equally, we cannot downplay free SHS. We can quibble about who is first and who's second and who's third if you're going to arrange like that position. But he makes the point that looking at the access point perspective alone, and I'm sure the number now has gone up even further. It is the most consequential. He's the most consequential minister.
Okay, so in 30 seconds, so he'll be outdoor tomorrow.
That's correct, yes.
Is it like a stadium kind of event? Or like
it's at Jubilee Park.
So it's an outdoor event?
It's an outdoor event, yes.
Okay, and you'll be there?
I'm leaving for Kumasi right from here.
We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodney Nkrumah Boateng, Press Secretary to the running mate to Dr. Bawumia, Matthew Poku Prempe, called Napo. We'll be covering that event for you on Tuesday. Stay with us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.